Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad, and I welcome all the participants in this series. Today, we are having another session of Ask Dr. Saleem, where the participants can ask questions pertaining to our religion. Before we commence our session, I would like to share certain rules with the participants. Maximum duration of this session is an hour. You may ask a question in your preferred language, which might be Urdu or any English, but Dr. Shehzad will be answering your questions in English. You may also raise your hand in order to ask a question. If by chance you can't raise your hand, you may leave your name in the chat box, and I'll call your name in a queue. So with that, I'll kick off the session by calling Mr. Humayun Majid. Please unmute your mic and ask your question. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad Saleem Saab. I am from Kashmir and I have a record with you. I have a question about Quran that what is the basic requirement to understand the Holy Quran? Is there only requirement that a person have a command on Arabic language, or is there any other requirements to understand the Holy Quran in real separate? Thank you, sir.
So you've asked about the requirement of understanding the Quran. So I think I would divide this understanding into two broad areas. So one is that you pick up any translation that you are comfortable with. For example, if you are comfortable with Urdu or English or Persian or your Kashmiri language, I'm sure there are plenty of translations available. So just start reading the Quran with a translation. So this is one mode, and I call it the short-term mode. The long-term mode is that you start learning Quranic Arabic parallel to this reading of translation, so that whilst you are absorbing the message of the Quran, at the same time you have also started learning the language of the Quran. And there are many good websites and apps which can navigate you through learning Quranic Arabic. So also do understand that you don't need to learn Arabic, because Arabic has a vast scope. So Quranic Arabic is a subset. It's a shorter, it's a shorter course. So there are specialized websites and specialized apps which teach Quranic Arabic. And my understanding is that it takes about a year of concerted effort, maybe an hour a day for 5 or 6 days a week. And by the end of that year, you'll be able to understand a portion of the Quran when it is read out. And the only thing that will remain is the vocabulary, which can be slowly added. So my suggestion would be that start immediately by studying any good translation, any translation that you can get hold of in your own language. And parallel to that, a long-term process would be that you try to learn Quranic Arabic, so that when you read the Quran, whenever you read the Quran, you are not dependent on a translation. You can understand the Quran directly from its text. And this has its own benefits, because a translation is not always a complete replica of the original. It is like a basic message that can be transferred. But when you read the Quran in Arabic, not only do you absorb the original language, but also the effect it has on you. It actually urges you on to adopt whatever the Quran says. So the impact of the Quranic language is such that it's not just, understanding the Quran that you would gain from it. You will be propelled to action as well, because it's like God speaking to you. And when God speaks to someone, it's like a heart-to-heart conversation, and we get inspired that we are talking to God and God is talking to us. And this makes us more motivated. So just to sum up, I would say start off with a translation, and in parallel to that, learn Quranic Arabic. And soon this Quranic Arabic will replace the translation. You'll not be needing a translation after some time. And that is the target that you must set before yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Samar Fatima, you may unmute your mic and ask a question.
Sir, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, I have two questions. The first question is about the economic system of Islam, that it is said that Islam is a complete code of life. Then why isn't a certain kind of economic system, as we have known that capitalism and communism in modern times? So best Islamic system is amalgam of both, or is that anyone else? And my second question is related to the existence
Can we
of the
take
God.
one? one question at a time, please.
Yes, sir, sure, please.
Okay, so I mean, this is a misnomer. This is a statement that is generally given that Islam is a complete code of life. I think it should be replaced by another statement, and that is that Islam provides principles of leading a collective life in conformity with whatever the Quran says. So it's not that Islam is a code of life. Basically, it is basically principles. It provides principles, and those principles are basically given to mankind, and the system which can be evolved on the basis of those principles, which we can call rules, regulations, or to use a more technical term, we can call the economic Sharia. I mean, the economic laws of Islam, which can be actually counted on your fingertips. These are 4 or 5 laws. And as far as these laws are concerned, once you are familiar with these laws, then the system which has to be made on the basis of these laws could be different in different countries. It could be different in different societies. It could be different in different eras of time. So I think what you need to understand is that basically Islam gives principles of economics. It gives you certain principles. For example, it gives you the fact that gambling, what we call usurpation of wealth, is something that is prohibited, which means that you should not obtain wealth through illegal means. So that is one principle. Another principle is that there should be a public sector created through the collective wealth which is obtained for a state. Then still another principle is that the law of inheritance, the way it has been described in the Quran, should be implemented in full. So I've just named 3. There are 4 or 5, and if you want, I can give you more details. But the bottom line is that these are the principles which Islam gives, and it is left to Islamic economists to make a system in line with these principles, in line with these laws or these regulations that it provides. The question that you have asked, that why is it that we don't find any Islamic system or alternative economic system, and all that we know is about capitalism or socialism or communism. So I can tell you that these are 2 systems which are at variance with Islam or the Quran. They are 2 entirely different systems, and Islam obviously has some comments to make on them, and there are some parts of each of these systems which it does corroborate and some of which it critiques. But as I said, Islam has its own economic purview. It has its own economic principles. The fault that has been taking place is that we are trying to you are trying to derive a system from the Quran. It's not going to be found because it's not there. The Quran does not give us a system. It gives us rules. It gives us principles, or in other words, as I said, it gives us the Sharia. The economic Sharia, or the laws which are based, which relate to economics, and the system has to be made by human beings, not by the Quran, because it has not been any such system. So it's like Islamic economists or people who are economists who understand these principles, they need to make that system. So, and as I said, the basic error which is being committed for the past many decades is that people are trying to discover the system from the Quran. And had there been a system in the Quran, it wouldn't have taken long to discover it. It's not there in the Quran. So there are just principles which are found in the Quran regarding economics. The principle has to be made by human beings. And because people are not realizing this, they have not realized this for so many decades, that they always end up deriving a system, or they want to derive a system from the Quran. And as I said, I'm afraid there is no such system which is prescribed by the Quran. It only gives principles. The system has to be made by human beings.
So, sir, if there are only certain principles, so is it any current Muslim country or even after the era of the Khulafai Rashidin who followed exactly the principles of Islam and made any economic system?
So you see, during the Caliphate, which followed the rightly guided Caliphate, we had the Umayyads, we had the Abbasids, we had the Ottomans. They all followed an economic system which was based on the rules of Islam. But I think it is in the last 100 years, after the dismemberment of the institution of Khilafat, which took place in 1924, when Mustafa Kemal abolished the Ottoman Caliphate. So it is basically in these last 100 years when small Muslim states have sprung up. We have many Muslim countries. Prior to that, we had an empire, which was like a like a big empire which had many countries, and yes, they were independent countries as well, and they were all trying to make their two ends meet through making a viable economic system. But I think what has happened is that in these last 100 years, in which many countries have gained independence and have become independent units, that this movement towards creating an Islamic system has started. So it's just 100 years old. It's not that it's, I mean, we've not done it before. We have been successful partly in various eras within the caliphates, and all these caliphates like the Umayyads, the Abbasids, and the Ottomans. In the last 100 years, actually, what has happened is that people have tried to make this economic system from, they have to try to derive the economic system from the Quran, which I just said. And this is a basic mistake which is being made. And if people just stick to those principles and then make the system themselves, they might be successful. At the moment, what I'm saying is not being generally understood. People don't, I mean, they don't make the same observation which I've just presented before you. We are not in conformity with each other, in other words. So people still think that they have to derive the economic system from the Quran. So this is like a lone voice, maybe a couple of voices which say that no, will not get any system from the Quran, you'll just get principles. So unless this is something which is more thrashed out, unless people are willing to discuss this more, it might not be very fruitful at the moment, because as I said, just a few people are, I mean, trying to vouch for this. And the second important impediment has been what we call interest-free banking. And this PLS banking or interest-free banking is a mode which has been established, and Dr. Najatullah Siddiqui, a very revered economist who passed away just recently, he's one of the founders of this economic system in which interest-free banking has been introduced. And again, interest-free banking is a term which contradicts its very inception. Banking cannot go without interest unless there are certain basic reformations made, and as I said, that again is a point of discussion. So cutting the long story short, as I said, in the last 100 years we are still struggling, and as far as we are concerned, I'm particularly talking about the institution that I work for, or I can also talk about my own teacher, Ustaz Javed Ghamidi, who has actually presented an alternative, I mean, on these principles, and he's also presented a sort of a framework on which on which this system can be derived. But it needs to be more, I mean, delivered to more people and disseminated. Discussions have to be held, and so this is what we have tried to come up with. So I cannot say about others, because as I said, others are mostly working on either deriving a system, or as I said, working on that interest-free model, which of course is a farce. And if you see and go in detail, you just find that this interest-free banking is just a change of terms, and whatever they call as profit is actually interest. So it's just like changing the terms, but the essence of interest is still there in interest-free banking. So unless our scholars are willing to rethink this process, all that I can do, or all that we can do, or all that we are able to do is to put across our view as far as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Rafia Khwaja, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. My question is that all Muslims believe that Quran is for the whole of humanity. If a non-Muslim reads the Quran, is not convinced by it, and he wants to stick to his own beliefs and faith, and then dies, what will happen to him on the day of judgment?
So I think what we need to understand is that the basic responsibility which the Almighty has imposed on every human being is quest for the truth, search for the truth. So if a person has sincerely searched for the truth, he has read the Quran and he's not convinced by it, obviously he has to have some solid reasoning for that. I do think that he would be given concession on the day of judgment, because he tried his best and he was not able to be convinced by the Quran and certain things which the Quran says. But even before we go to the Quran, the Almighty tells us that there are two things for which the Quran is not even needed, and that is the conception of a creator, and secondly, the fact that one day we will be held accountable for the deeds that we do on the basis of morality. So for these particular aspects, these two aspects, the Quran says, or the Almighty says, that even the book of God is not needed. So if you're not convinced of the book of God, or there's something has happened in which has made you absolutely convinced that you are true on your own religion, then whatever that religion is, if that religion takes you to the truth, okay, God might give you that concession. But as I said, other than that, what the Quran tells us is that as far as the evidence of God is concerned and the evidence of the fact that we shall be held accountable is concerned, this is supra scripture. This is something which does not need scriptures to be studied in. This is something which a person can go through self-reflection. So for such a person, he will be held accountable on the basis of the conception of God that we might have, and whether he did good deeds on the basis of the morals that were ingrained in him. I think he would be asked this question on the day of judgment.
So Shehzad Sahib, if he believes in God and believes in the day of judgment, but doesn't necessarily believe in following the Quran, but does good deeds, then he will be, God will judge him according to his actions and his beliefs. Is that correct?
What I'm saying is that he has given enough time to study the Quran. He has gone through the Quran, and in spite of going through the Quran, and in spite of contemplating the fact that this is a book about which Muslims claim that it is revealed by the Almighty and it is there in its original form, so he has to intellectually reject or refute these arguments. I mean, he should be in a position to refute the fact that yes, either the Quran is not from God, or whatever it says is incoherent or does not seem to be from God, and at the same time it is something which has perhaps, if it's not from God, or maybe if it is from God, then the second question might arise is that, is it the same Quran which was revealed to Prophet Muhammad? So yes, if he is convinced that no, it has been tampered with or it has been changed, then again he should have enough intellectual argument. So what I'm saying is that if he has gone through this exercise in intellectually refuting or rejecting the Quran convincingly, with sincerity, not out of any vested interest, then he might be dealt with concession from the Almighty, and his accountability would then rely on the conception of God and the morality that is ingrained in him, as far as his accountability in the hereafter is concerned.
I was thinking of Christian and Jews and all the other non-Muslims. Those are the people I had in mind.
So as I said, I mean, if they have this, they've tackled this question, if they have sincerely tackled this question, whether this Quran is really a book of God, and they have refuted it or rejected it out of pure intellectual honesty, then yes, I think there is a ground for that. But then this is an exercise that they have to go through. And another thing, what I would say is that as far as the Day of Judgment is concerned and the accountability of the Day of Judgment is concerned, what best we can do is to present these objective standards. As far as saying that which of the groups will go to heaven or to hell, this is something which is God's domain. It is for him to decide, and we have to be, we are absolutely sure that he will decide on the basis of justice. No injustice shall be done, no person will be wronged. But yes, if you ask in principle, I would say that if a person has rejected the prophethood of Muhammad or the Quran as a scripture through very strong intellectual arguments, then he shall be held accountable on the basis of his conception of God, and as I said, the morals that he had been ingrained, which were with him when he was born, whether he followed them or not.
Okay, moving forward, Muhammad Abdullah.
Assalamu alaikum. Sir, I heard a video of yours in which you were saying that in Islam there's concept that everything is in God's knowledge. There is no concept that everything is predestined. So there is a verse in Quran in chapter 57 that says that no disaster strikes your earth, but it is in a register. And further it says that it is so you don't be sad for what you have lost and boastful about what you have gained. So if everything bad or good happening to me is a result of my own actions, so naturally I would be sad or boastful about what I have gained or lost. And this is giving me a sense that everything that is going to happen is according to that register. So it was going to happen, whatever actions I would have taken. So doesn't this verse is giving us a sense that everything is predestined? It will happen according to that register. Thank you.
Okay. So actually, the verse that you are citing is from Surah Hadid, which says "La tafrahu bima atakum," and some of the other words which say that should not be happy for what God has. "Wala ta'saw ala ma fatakum, wala tafrahu bima atakum," which means that don't be sad for what is taken away, and don't be too much happy on what is given to you. So this is not actually pointing towards predestination. All that it is telling us is that this is something which is in God's pre-knowledge, and it had to happen. But that happening had to take place by our own will. So it's not that the Quran is telling us that don't be happy because things have been predestined. It is telling us that don't be happy because this was something that was bound to happen out of your own free will. I mean, God just knew that it would be happening. It's not that God was programming you to happen to take the shape that you just had. He had given you the freedom to do whatever you like, but in his knowledge, he knew what you would do. So in other words, he knew what you would do, but you would do it through your own independent free will. So this verse, which Surah Hadid is telling us, that because of the fact that this is something which was destined to happen, not because God had destined it, but because it was a destiny through your own free will, and God knew the result already. So therefore, if something is taken away from you, don't be very sad. And if you're given something, don't be very happy, because in this grand scheme of things, this is what was bound to happen. Actually, it is consoling us, and it's telling us that if you are feeling sad, that why did I not get the thing that I was maybe praying for, or why was a certain incident, why did it happen in such a way? Then it is actually consoling us, and it is telling us that in the scheme of God, it was bound to happen the way it has happened. Not because God had made it happen like that way, but because God knew that from your own free will, you would do it like this, and it was in God's foreknowledge. So I think this is the shift of the, or this is the, I would say, undercurrent of the verse, and it is not at all telling us that things are predestined. And one more thing, that if you like to have to know more about it, I would suggest that you pick up Surah Hadid, which is the 57th surah, and read the tafsir of Ustaz Amin Islahi under this verse, and you'll find out how beautifully it's explained that this is not predestination that the Quran is referring to. It is actually referring to the fact that it is done out of your own free will, but because it was destined to happen, so therefore don't become too sad or too happy, because these things are just going to bog you down, and they either make you very, arrogant if you become too happy, or it will frustrate you if you become too sad. In the grand scheme of things, these were things that were meant to happen. You need to move on in life. So this is the basic message of the verse.
Thank you. Up next is Aruba Shafqat. Please unmute your mic and ask a question.
Assalamu alaikum. My question was about why Quran does not say anything about transgenders? And when I say the term transgenders, I mean to talk about people who were born with this disability, and not those who changed their gender when they by their own will. So I just wanted to know, and if I'm ignorant and I don't know if Quran does say anything about it, I want to know that what does Quran say about them? Thank you.
Yes, you're correct that the Quran does not speak about transgenders. It does not, because you see the real topic of the Quran is that it guides human intellect wherever it is liable to falter. I mean, wherever there is a chance of human intellect faltering in cases, only then there is a guidance. For example, it does not speak about handicapped children. It doesn't speak when children are born blind or if they are born handicapped. So if a person is born as a transgender such that there's an ambiguity in his gender or her gender, it's not that there is a question of desire. It's just that there is an ambiguity. So it's like a handicap that a person is having. And again, this is something which is not a very common occurrence. If you take a human sample and you see that the number of human beings which are born and how many of them have, the gender that we call masculine and the feminine, and how many are transgenders, you'll find that the proportion of that is very, very insignificant. So what the Quran actually talks about is that it gives us directives regarding men and women. And about transgenders, it doesn't give us any directive. It has left this to our intellect and discretion. And I think our jurists have come up with a very cogent answer to this question as well, and they say that in transgenders, generally there is one dominant trait, either the male trait or the female trait. So if there has to be some issue that has to be decided on the basis of Sharia, for example, should a transgender be treated as a boy or a girl or a man or a woman in the case of inheritance? So they have given us this guidance that whatever their dominant aspect is, they should be treated in that way. So as I said, the Quran has left this to our own discretion and our own intellect to decide about various matters which pertain to religion in this respect. Other than that, for example, if this deformity or this handicap can be cured through an operation, which now has become possible in the last 30 years, Islam does not have any objection. And so therefore, this is something that has been taking place in the last so many years, and still people do encourage it. And if it is possible, people should go for it. One objection that it might have is that people who are born as clear males or clear females, I mean, they are distinct. And then they come up with the idea that they would like to change their gender, for example, like a gender reassignment surgery, which they would do. Now, this is a case of ijtihad, I would say, because this is a issue which never arose in the time of the Prophet, and things which are not covered in the Quran or the Sunnah, they are subject of ijtihad. And I would go with the dominant ijtihad in this case, and that is that as far as people who desire their gender to be changed, I would not be in favor of that, because of the fact that that would go against the scheme of God. I mean, God has created you as a male, and your own test and trial is a male. And if you change your gender, it would perhaps go against the scheme of God. Well, whereas if you were handicapped and any transformational operation could make you a distinct male or distinct female, that would be a service that science is doing, and I think that we should go for that. But desiring to be of a different gender is something which would go against the scheme of God. For God, He has created us in a particular country, with a particular color, in a particular family, and with a particular gender. So these are selections which are made by God on the basis of His wisdom. So in that particular area, my inclination is that they should not be allowed. And people who are born the way that they are, that they are distinctly male or distinctly female, they should suffice at their own gender. But as I said, if there is any deformity or a handicap and that can be cured, then that's an entirely different scenario, and it could be accomplished, I would say.
Thank you for the clarification. Usman Liaquat, please go ahead, ask a question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, as we know, Hajj was started at the time of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam. So my question is, did the Jews and Christians also come to Makkah to perform Hajj every year? Or did any other prophet of Bani Israel ever come to Makkah to perform Hajj? And if there is any reference, kindly provide that also. Jazakallah.
I think that there is no proof that any of the prophets did come. However, there is a proof regarding the Prophet David or Dawud alayhi salam that he did come for pilgrimage to the holy mosque, and there are references. And if you would like more detailed references, you can pick up the works of Ustaz Abdul Sattar Ghori. He passed away about 8 or 9 years ago, and he was a distinguished scholar of biblical studies, and he has published works from Mawrid, our institute. You'll find one of his books which deal with this particular subject, and he has shown through certain references that the Prophet David did come, and he did offer the pilgrimage of the holy mosque. Other than that, we don't find any other references to the best of my knowledge.
Up next is Naveed Ashraf. Please unmute and ask a question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab. Dr. Sahab, I have some friends and people in my circle who are atheists and who are non-Muslims, and we inevitably end up discussing religion. And one of the arguments which gets presented to me is something like, they say that, okay, you seem to be proposing that your belief system is perhaps the best one, and you try to convince us on the oneness of God and even the existence of God. Fair enough. But why don't you tell us, if we come into your belief system, what exactly are we gaining? How will it change our life? I mean, we are living as normal citizens of this world. with good morals. Our own religion, or even the atheists, they believe that we believe in good morality and all of that. So what exactly is it that we are gaining by just coming to your belief system? So
I think
that's
the
really
biggest thing, right, the biggest thing that they're going to gain is that they will be informed as to what will happen after we pass away. So the biggest contribution of divine religions is that it addresses this question, which has been raised since time immemorial. Philosophy has raised this question. People of all times have grappled with this question: that is this life all that there is? And if the answer is yes, then you can tell your friends that nothing, religion is not going to add anything further. For example, if you have good morals, you're good human beings, and you respect other people and have the right attitude, it's not going to significantly change your life. However, if you come to this conclusion that this life is not all that there is, and there is a possibility of life hereafter, because the structure of this world itself is somehow incomplete, or it has its own arguments which tell us that there is another world to it. It is here that religion gives us its greatest service and benefit. It tells us that life is not all that we seem to be. It's going to end one day, and we are going to be raised up again. There's going to be another life in the hereafter, and people would be held accountable for what they did in this world. So this is what is going. This dimension is going to be added in their thoughts, that for life hereafter, there are certain deeds that they need to do, and there are certain issues that they need to resolve, and there is a system in which this has to happen, and that has been given by divine scriptures. And precisely for this reason, the Almighty sent His prophets and messengers, and with them He revealed His books, so that He could guide them regarding the hereafter, and in order to be successful in the hereafter, what exactly is the pattern of life that they need to follow in this world. Yes, if they are good human beings, this is something which is very considerate of them. It's something very commendable. But then religion will tell us that if there is a creator, then we have to connect to our creator. That creator is someone who's going to benefit our lives in a way that a lot of things that we don't understand in this life, we have to sort of trust God. A lot of trials and tribulations that come our way, which make us frustrated, which make us disappointed, and which, as a result of which, we have to take drugs or pills or go to a doctor. A lot of things will be explained through this these divine scriptures, that they happen because there is a scheme of things according to which things happen. So this, as I said, yes, the main dimension would be life after death, but within this life as well, there would be some dimensions that they would be adding to themselves, as I said, that life's failures, life's disappointments and frustrations, which often go to such extremes that people end up even taking their own lives. You will get another explanation that this life has been created for a particular purpose, and that is to test mankind. And because mankind has been put into that test, we find good and bad circumstances being inflicted on people. And also the answer that why is it that there are so many good people in this world and they die a horrible death, or they are left high and dry, or they're not very successful in life at times. They do all sorts of good deeds, but they end up on the wrong side of things. They might have financial problems, they might have a lot of other problems. There could be so much injustice done to good people. So you see, there are certain other questions which might still bother atheists, that why is it that the fate of good is not necessarily good? And similarly, there could be other aspects as well. But as I said, barring these additions to this life, which I just referred to, the major addition that they would have is that if there is life after death, then they have to prepare themselves for that. And if they do believe that there's no life after death, then not much can be added significantly to what they believe in.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. A limited point. So this does answer the question about atheists, but I have some Christian and Hindu friends also. So in their belief system, they do have something similar, the belief in the afterlife, and they have their own, especially Hindus, they have their own way of thinking about it. They believe in 7 reincarnations, but there is this concept of life after death, etc. So I'm not sure, what arguments can be presented
So
to
again,
them.
Shruti, although the Abrahamic religions have this concept of life after death, Hindus have this concept of life after death. But as I said, they believe in the philosophy of reincarnation, which actually is something in which life forms are transferred from one to another depending upon what they did in their previous life. But you see, one big question which arises on this form of accountability or this form of judgment after life is that as per the Quran or divine scriptures, the person will know that if he is being punished in the hereafter, then what exactly he did wrong in the previous world. But in the reincarnation theory, for example, if a person is born in a lesser life form, he did not do good deeds, and he ended up becoming some sort of an animal which was of a lesser life form. That animal would never recall what made him that particular shape. What wrong did he do in his previous form as a human being that made him end up in this situation? So there's a disconnect between reward and punishment. So here we would say that the nature of reward and punishment which is being presented is something which cannot be justified. I mean, if I made a monkey or maybe made a camel, and if I don't even know that what is the reason that I've been made, because I would not have any memory that I was initially a human being, and as a human being I behaved wrongly and now have become a camel or some other animal. Because of this disconnect, we will say that, well, this is not the reward or punishment which I would say is a logical conclusion of being good or bad. It's like saying that, well, you reach this form not because you know that you did something wrong, but because you are there for the sake of being there. So in that case, what we will do is that we will critically evaluate the nature of life after death, the way they are being presented. As far as Christians are concerned, they do, of course, believe that they'll be resurrected. But then again, there is this disconnect, because they believe that if they just believe in the crucifixion of Jesus, that he died on the cross for the sufferings of humankind, all that they need to do is believe in this, then they shall attain salvation. Whatever they might do as people, if they profess belief in the crucifixion of Christ, that he was crucified on the cross, and he actually atoned the sins of all mankind, and the rest of mankind can do anything that they like, as long as they believe that Jesus had died on the cross for their sins. Again, as I said, this would be a concept according to which we will discuss that how can a person atone for the sufferings or the sins of other people, and other people not be punished for that. Again, as I said, that would not be a very logical thing. So as I said, that people who have this concept of life after death, they can be critically evaluated. But mind you, none of these are called atheists. So Hindus who believe in reincarnation, or Christians who believe in Jesus being crucified for their sins, they cannot be classical atheists, because an atheist is someone who would not believe in any God. I mean, not believe in anything which relates to the hereafter or life after death. So I think classically these Hindus and these Christians, they cannot be classified as atheists. And as I said, your question relates to atheism.
Ahsan, please go ahead and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is about life after death. So I wanted to ask, is the place of death predetermined, or the time of death predetermined? Any reference from the Quran? Thank you.
Yes, the Quran in Surah Luqman, the 31st Surah, near the end of it, it tells us that God knows the place. In Thamud, it says that where a person is going to die, it is in the knowledge of the Almighty. And some of the other things also are mentioned there. But other than that, there is a general statement which the Quran gives, and that is God knows the future, everything was going to happen in future. So this is a generic statement. And if you take this generic statement, this would obviously mean that it is in God's knowledge that the age of the person, the place of death, the cause of death, and all those things which relate to death are already known to him. So it's like God's knowledge that we're talking about. And because he has said that his knowledge embraces the past, the present, and the future. So yes, I would say that if this generic statement is enough to tell us that all these things are in the prior knowledge of God.
So encompassing saying like the God's knowledge encompasses all these questions, that is one thing. But the other side of this picture is that what kind of action one could have taken to to influence the circumstances in which one was, facing maybe like the last moments of her life or his life. So, strictly from humans' point of view, is it arguable that any action would have altered the course of the reality that took place in a certain way?
I'm not sure I understand your question correctly.
So what I was saying, like maybe for example, if somebody is on a ventilator and some action is being taken, so can it be argued that had the ventilator not taken off, there was a chance of recovery or something like that?
Yes, these are all chances there, because you see, these are all human manipulations. I mean, you could have argued that had the ventilator not been taken off, the person might have survived, or because you have taken it off, which is which is like a scientific phenomenon. It's just like saying that if you slaughter someone, if you kill someone, he's going to die, and if you don't pull the trigger, he's not going to die. So all these things are technically possible, but the knowledge of God is that whatever is going to happen, and whatever is going to happen through a person's free will. Whatever he's going to do, or some other person might be doing it to him or her, but whatever would be done is in God's foreknowledge. So these are two independent things. So you can argue, all these arguments can be made in favor of death or the lack of it, or the fact that the person could have lived. And as I said, that could be based on simple scientific inquiries. Like, for example, had you been given the medicine at the right time, had the injection been administered at the right time, a person could have been saved. All these things are there. It could be human error which resulted. For example, there are accidents which take place, that a person is crossing the road, he's absolutely fine, but a car comes and bangs him and he just passes away. So these are like things which could have been avoided. And had the person not been crossing the road at that time, he would have of course survived. But the thing is that the fact that he passed away is in God's foreknowledge, that this is what is going to happen. And when the person was crossing that particular road, it's not that God was asking him to go and cross that road. He was doing it out of his own free will, because, for example, he was going to the market, and this just happened at that time. So the register of God, or the knowledge of God, would be that such and such a person, out of his own free will cross a road, and right at that time when he would be crossing, there would be a car coming from the opposite direction and would just bang him off. So this is what God knows. But the act would be done by the person himself or herself out of his or her own free will.
Thank you. Up next is Muhammad. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
I have a question about your book, History of the Quran. I had the privilege to read the book, and then I have also gone through the question and answer series of Ustaz Ghamidi and Hassan Ilyas. I had a feeling that there is some difference of opinion about the narratives of the collection of the Quran, and specifically the differences in the reading between your opinion and Ustaz. So I have started again reading the history of the Quran in the light of those question and answer sessions. But can you please comment? Am I right, or it's just something I am not well conceiving? And second question.
Right. Can we just go with one question, because I think there are people in the queue? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely correct that there is a difference of perception between myself and my teacher regarding these narratives. So I can just tell you the basic difference. The basic difference is that the way these narratives have been interpreted in the past, I have critiqued those narratives on the basis of this interpretation, and that is something which has, in my own view, this critique is enough to reject them. But what Ustaz has done is that he has reinterpreted those narratives in a different way. So, like, there is a narrative, there is a general understanding of that narrative, and there is a re-understanding of that narrative, like a counter-understanding. So what I have done is I have critiqued the general understanding which is there in the last 14 centuries, which the Ummah has presented, and critiqued them. Whereas what Ustaz has done is that he has rejected the conventional understanding, and he has made a new understanding of those narratives. Personally, I am still at variance with that, and I am not fully comfortable with the reinterpretation that he has made. I have been discussing this with him constantly, still going on. My discussion is going on because there are a lot of things. But he is insisting that there is a reinterpretation of these narratives that he has done. And as a result of that reinterpretation, there's no need to reject those narratives. Whereas I think that the interpretation that he is making is slightly far-fetched. I say this with due respect to my teacher, but I think that his interpretation of these narratives is far-fetched. And it's also like overstretching what the narrative is actually saying. Whereas I think that the conventional understanding of those narratives is what is the right understanding, and that understanding itself is a flawed understanding, and therefore I had to critique those narratives. So this is a rough summary of what you might have been feeling while reading both views or understanding both views.
Dr. Shehzad. Up next is Bilal Khalid. Please go ahead and ask your question.
रिलेटेड है जो पहले सूरह हदीद के बारे में जो डिस्कशन हुई है उसमें जिस तरह हमें सब ने अपनी काफ़ी टॉक्स में बताया है कि खुदा ने बहुत सी चीज़ों में हमें जो है ऑप्शन नहीं दिया, लेकिन बहुत सी चीज़ों में खुदा ने हमें ऑप्शन दिया कि हम अपनी फ्री विल से डिसाइड करें। अब जिस तरह खुदा के नॉलेज में है कि फॉर एग्जाम्पल कोई भी चीज़ है वो हमें ज़िंदगी में नहीं मिलनी, खुदा को पता है कि आदमी मेरे से दुआएं करेगा पर ये चीज़ से नहीं मिलनी, लेकिन क्या खुदा दुआओं से या हमारे किसी ऐसे अमल से, किसी सदका करने से या कोई ऐसा हमारे को नेक अमल से उससे मुतासिर हो के क्या ये ऐसा डिसाइड कर सकता है कि ये चीज़ मेरे से दे दूँ इसी ज़िंदगी में? तो क्या खुदा मतलब एक्टिवली हमारी दुआओं को सर रिस्पॉन्ड करता है या जो चीज़ खुदा को पता है कि नहीं मिलनी तो नहीं मिलेगी? Thank you.
So your question is regarding the relationship between dua and its outcome. I would say that I mean this is a difficult question to answer because you just cannot read God's mind. This is something which only God can tell us. But my understanding of this question would be that you study the Quran. It does give us this message that yes, there are things for which unless you ask them, God is not going to give them. I mean, there are things which God has given or decides to give on his own accord without you even asking them. For example, he would be very merciful to you, very affectionate, very magnanimous in giving you rewards with that you've not even asked. But yes, on the contrary, there have been situations or there could be situations in which unless you ask for something, how could you think that that thing has to be given to you? Because you see, for example, if you want a certain thing, and that thing is something about which God has ordained that unless my person or my servant asks this question, I would not or makes this dua, I'm not going to give him. So I think yes, these are the things that you have to come up with that request before God so that he can grant it. But as I said, this is not limited to that. Other than that, without your asking, there could be things which God has decided to give you because of your good behavior, and there could be several other things. But your question does, I mean, if I answer your question, it does make this connection between yourself and the Almighty, that you have to put your request to him in order to register that yes, you would like this thing to happen. Whether he gives it or not is based on his own wisdom. For example, if you need to ask something, you would of course go and make dua, but there's always this possibility that God does not answer or respond to your dua, and therefore you would not get that thing. But then there could be things about which God has ordained that if such and such a person makes a request, yes, I'm going to grant him. So this is like a two-way thing. On certain occasions, God might choose to remain silent and not respond to you because a grand scheme would be against that. And on other occasions, he might respond to you. And then that would be the case in which you would say, yes, I did ask and I got what I asked. And then there was a third scenario in which without you asking anything, God, out of his magnanimity, out of his graciousness, he gives you things that you not even imagined that you would get.
तो इसमें जो बहुत सी दुआएं ऐसी होती हैं जो खुदा हमारी आखिरत के लिए छोड़ देता है, हमें दुनिया में नहीं देता। तो हम इसलिए हम सोचते हैं कि वो तमाम चीजें खुदा हमें नहीं देगा, या फॉर एग्जांपल जो खुदा ने हमारे लिए नहीं रखी हुई, तो क्या खुदा हमारे किसी अमल से खुश होकर क्या हमें चीजें अता कर सकता है? अच्छा, हमें कोई कुरान या हदीस से ऐसा कोई?
I think as this is something which only God can decide. But yes, what we do know from a narrative of the Prophet is that either a dua is accepted, or it is deferred, or it is actually counted as a good deed, and you're rewarded for that dua itself. So dua itself is a form of worship. So we know the Prophet has said, a dua huwal ibadah, a dua mukhul ibadah, which means that the supplication or the dua that you make is in fact an act of worship. So yes, just by making dua, if you are not, I mean, the Almighty does not respond to your dua or defers it, if neither of these two takes place, then we have been told by the Prophet then that the dua itself will become a good deed which shall be rewarded in the hereafter.
Thank you so much.
Up next is Rabia Jameel. Rabia, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is about the concept Islam gives about Satan, Shaitan. I'm very confused about it. That how Shaitan is pre-informed about what we're gonna do in future. How can Shaitan distract us as only Allah is nearer to us more than jugular vein? So how can Shaitan is informed about every action we do, and Shaitan distracts us in every matter as we offer salat, and he tries to distract us. So please, can you please clear this?
So actually, what you need to understand is that Satan is the name of, is generally the name of Iblis, who was the first person who disobeyed God, or the first being who disobeyed God, and therefore his name was Iblis. Now, everyone, whether he belongs to mankind or jinn kind, every evil person is called by the Quran as Shaitan. So Shaitan is like a generic name. It's a name that's been given to all sorts of evil people who do a certain thing, which I'm just going to explain. But they can be found amongst mankind and amongst jinn kind, because in Surah Nas we see that the Quran says that this Satan or these Shaitan are from Minal Jinnati wan Nas. They are from jinn kind and from mankind. So one thing that we have to understand is that it is not just there's just one Iblis. Iblis was the first Satan, so to speak, and he did his job in the earliest period when mankind was being created. For the rest, the Quran says that all people who whisper evil suggestions. Whispering evil suggestion means that they just conceive in your own mind bad ideas. That's all that they can do. The rest is something that we are left to follow or not follow. For example, Satan can distract us by giving evil suggestions, and that is all that it can do. It cannot forcibly make us follow his suggestions. So that is where human freedom or human free will comes into play. So the Almighty tells us that Satan has just been given, or people who act as Satan, they could be from jinn kind, mankind, all that they can do is they can whisper evil suggestions. They can tempt you. They can allure you. All that they can do is to tempt you. That's all. Whether you follow what
we have evil thoughts as well.
Yes, go on.
I said we have evil thoughts as well. That no one suggests us to do that. So how we in hadith it's mentioned that the Satan distracts you to do that, and so our thoughts can become Satan, and what?
So you see, the mechanism for this is not known. What we know is that the jinn kind, they are able to whisper evil suggestions in our mind. How do they do it? We don't know about that. But yes, the evil thoughts that we get, the sources are two. The Quran tells us, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَى, which means our own nafs or our own soul. So one of the sources of evil or evil temptations is our own soul. So our own soul can suggest evil things. And the other thing is Satan. So there are two sources of evil thoughts. Satan can whisper evil suggestions in our mind, which if we want, we can follow. Otherwise, we can just turn away from them. And similarly, our own soul also gives us these evil suggestions. So there are two sources of these evil suggestions. One is our own soul, and the other is Satan, and as I said, he could belong to mankind and to jinn kind as well. But in both cases, all that these sources can do is they can just tempt you. They'll just allure you. The rest has to be done by mankind themselves. If they follow those temptations, then they'll be led away. If they don't follow those temptations and they just disrupt them or just unfollow them, it will be like conquering your own evil suggestions. So yes, these are the two sources.
So everything that distracts us, either people, our own nerves, that would be Satan.
No. Satan is separate. As I said, our own soul is a separate source. There are two sources of evil suggestions. One is our own soul, which is independent of Satan, which is independent of Shaitan. This is one source. The other source is Shaitan. So there are two sources. One of them is our own soul, and the other one is our satanic people. We cannot distinguish. If you ask me that if I'm getting those evil suggestions, whether I'm getting from my own soul or whether it's from some Satan, I cannot say that. I cannot distinguish because I don't have the mechanism to distinguish. But the Quran tells us that as far as these evil suggestions are concerned, these are two sources, and both are equally strong. If not, one of them might be stronger. And precisely for this reason, there are certain hadith narratives that tell us that during Ramadan, Satan is not able to do his evil work. So it's just our soul which whispers evil suggestion during Ramadan, because during the Ramadan time, these devils, they are just chained and they cannot do their work.
Jameel Bani is back, so please go ahead and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, as a Kashmiri Muslim, how should we respond as per the Quran and Hadith to the current Indian government policies who follow the footsteps of RSS mindset, who have isolated us politically, disenfranchised us since 5th August 2019, and have the same plan in future what Israel is doing right now with Palestinians? Thank you, sir.
I think this is more of a political question and as far as religion is concerned, it does give you a guidance, and that guidance is that when you are facing oppression of the authorities, then you must not retaliate in any militant way. So at the moment, what we are seeing is there is a retaliation on the part of the Kashmiris, on the part of the Palestinian people, and that retaliation is now taking place in the form of a war. It's like an attack launched by one side and then the response from the other side. So it's like two groups being in a state of war. When you are being oppressed, I think the right way is that you bear that oppression, that you start off with your democratic rights if they are being granted. And if you are being persecuted, then that persecution should not be retaliated in a way that you start killing or countering your own persecution by killing other people. So at the moment, what I am seeing, what I do see, I must confess that my knowledge is limited because what I know is purely on the basis of the media that comes to our houses or through our internet. And that is, we do find this retaliation going on the part of the oppressed people. So the directive of religion in that regard is that if people are killing you unjustly, then you don't have the right to retaliate in the same way and you start killing other people unjustly. You have to bear that injustice and persecution, and at the same time, these world forums which are responsible for peace and security, they have their door has to be knocked, and we have 55 Muslim countries. They have to unite and fight for the cause of the oppressed people. But that is something which has to be done at the international level and at the forum of your own, I would say, higher authorities. But for a person, retaliating in a way that you start killing the opposite number is something that has to stop for starters.
I'll take up next question from Amin M.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab.
Wa alaikum assalam.
My question pertains to having watched your series from a couple of years ago on the analytical research of Quran. And I kept looking for these questions that I have about the delivery of Quran by peace be upon him. For example, I always think that he was a father, a husband, and a businessman. How did he differentiate the verses that was revealed to him and his normal conversations? For example, I imagine Nazul of, suppose, Surah Lahab. So he left his house, he goes towards Makkah, and he sees Mr. Abu Lahab standing somewhere, and he's probably talking to him. How would he differentiate? Just like in our today's conversations, if I have to quote you or if I have to quote Ghamidi Saab, I'll put that quote in quote. I would say, wait a minute, this is what Dr. Shehzad Saleem said, or this is what Ghamidi Saab said. So how would he differentiate, the revelations of Quran and his normal daily life? Would he go and just say, oh, guys, hold on a second, this was real to me last night? And also, it's the same question. And also in Quran, in certain instances, some questions that people at that time had asked him, they got answered, and Quran tries to answer them. So in those instances, what would he do? Would he go back in front of a congregation of people, or in the Masjid al-Nabi or in Makkah, and would address people? By the way, Shehzad Saleem or Amir, you asked this question, and now I got this revelation 10 days later or 3 months later, and this is the answer for that. How did how did he address that to people?
Yes, I got your question. I think this is also mentioned in the Quran that generally the mode of delivery would be that he would read out the verses in the Haram. And because the mosque was there in the times of when he was living in Mecca, it was still under the custodianship of the Quraysh. So they were the custodians of Mecca. He would go there and he would read out and say, yes, precisely what you just said, that this verse has been revealed to me, or this surah has been revealed to me last night, and I have been told to communicate it to you. So he would make this point that he would distinguish this by telling his opponents or his adversaries that now I'm going to recite before you the word of God that I received maybe an hour ago, whatever the time. And he would make this distinction that this is not what I'm saying. This is something which the book of God is saying. And at the same time, as I said, the book was being written down. It was being recited in the prayers. It was being discussed by the idolaters. And when they would read a certain verse, we find comments of the idolaters on that verse. We find Walid bin Mughira telling his compatriot that he has never heard such a discourse from anywhere. It looks from beyond this world. So the Quraysh, once the Quran has started to reveal, they were constantly eager to find out what new thing would be revealed, and they would get this from the Prophet directly, and his own Sahaba would also recite them out, and this would mostly take place in the Haram, but there were other instances also, or other places also where the Prophet would go. So whenever he would do that, he would make it a point to say that yes, whatever he's delivering is on behalf of God. And you can find a reference to this in so many areas of the Quran, in so many instances in which he is told that Qul, that go and tell this to them. So the word Qul is actually addressed to the Prophet Muhammad. So what Qul says that, O Prophet, declare this, go and recite this before these other people. And we do assume that in compliance to this directive, that go and read this out to your adversaries, he must have done so. And as far as his own personality is concerned, we find it very distinct from his own conversation. The Quran being distinct in his own conversation, because in that case he would be acting as a human being, not on behalf of God. And so therefore we find so many things in our hadith narratives in which the Sahaba would actually ask that, well, we are presenting this view, is it from God or is it your own opinion? For example, in one of the battles, I think it was the Battle of Badr probably, or Uhud, one of those battles, in which the Prophet said that he will go and fight at a certain place. And one of his companions asked him that, are you saying this on behalf of God? Has God told you to go and fight the enemy from that place, or is it your own opinion? So the Prophet actually replied that it was his own opinion. And the companion who's called Habab bin Munzir, he said, well, if it's your own opinion, then let me tell you that this is not the right place to fight. We should not go there. Instead, we should go to another place. So in this way, at a number of times when the Prophet would say something as an opinion, even the companions used to clarify. Another instance is in the time of Sulh Hudaybiyah, the truce of Hudaybiyah, in which when the Prophet was told that he should take off the ihram and do the qurbani at that time, the Sahaba were not convinced, and they thought that it would be a defeat on that part. And the Prophet said, Inni Mamur, I have been ordained by God and I have to do this. So this clarification would take place at times through a question asked, or sometimes the Prophet himself would clarify. But in other cases, as I said, when he would read out the Quran to the disbelievers or to the Quraysh, he would make it a point that this is something that has been revealed to him by God. And as far as the question is concerned, that what about some of the queries which were posed to the Prophet, like Yas'alunaka anil anfal or Yas'alunaka anil ahilla. So this would be something which would be, there in the atmosphere, that people would be asking this question, and God, the all-knowing, would know that these are the questions that exist in the surroundings. So those questions would be taken up, and then answers would be given. For example, if you take up Surah Kahf is a surah in which various questions have been asked. For example, yes, Aluna Kanan Zulkarnain. There was a question they would ask about Zulkarnain. Who is Zulkarnain? And then the Almighty revealed to the Prophet that who exactly he was and what exactly did he did. So we find this like a vibrant society in which conversation was going on, in which there were questions which were either in the minds or being discussed amongst people, and the Almighty would pick them up and then, of course, reveal his answer. And Prophet would say that, yes, this is an answer that I'd like to give you. And at times he would just, indirectly sort of say something without even referring to the question, so that things which are being discussed should be indirectly answered. So all these modes were employed, and you can find, what I've just said within the Quran. You can derive this from within the Quran.
So this is not the second question. It's very much relevant to the first question. For example, we all know what the first wahi was, Ikra, Surah Mudassir or Surah Muzammal. So at that time, there was no Muslims. If all his friends like Hazrat Ali and Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, what did he do? Just gather them up and just say, oh, I got revelation last night, or some angel came and he said.
So regardless of the fact whether my view is the same or not, I don't think this is correct that the first surah was revealed was Surah Iqra. It was Surah Fatiha, in fact, but that doesn't matter. Whatever the first wahi would be. So because your question relates to more of the fact that whatever the first wahi would be, yes, that is precisely what he would have done. That he would have said that this is a surah that was revealed to me, and I'm going to recite it out to you. So he would do this recital before the believers and also before the disbelievers. Remember, Mecca at that time was not a very cosmopolitan city. It was not like a place where hundreds and thousands of people reside. It was like a very short. It was like a neighborhood. Very small place, and communication was very much possible. It's not like today's cities or towns which have so many thousands of people. So a very conservative estimate of the people who actually migrated with the Prophet when he was migrating to Medina tells us there were 50 families which migrated with him at that time. So you can imagine that in those 11 or 12 years that he was there, these 50 families converted, and they were the people who had heard from him. And other than that, if you look at the demographics and the population of Mecca, you'll find out that it was under control, in which people could speak to each other personally, in which people, it was like every person knew the other person. It's like a small neighborhood, like the way we have in our own societies, in which maybe when you live close together, you know each other. So it was a tribal societies. We were not living in an urban society that we are living in today. So in tribal societies, one of the distinctive features is that the tribes know each other very well. So they are very well knit. And we have to transport ourselves mentally to that society in which, a tribe was an extension of a family. Simply put, it was an extension of a family. It's like a larger family. And things that were going on were constantly being reported from one end to the other. So if you are able to grasp the fact that in a tribal society with close neighborhood, with a very small number of population, the way that things were communicated were verbal. Yes, people were delivering that. For Muslims, the prayer was being done. In Ramadan, of course, there was this thing that was being done, which is called the presentation of the Quran from Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad, and then he would be reciting out. And in Medina, there were several people who would come from the outskirts of Medina, and they would profess Islam and they would accept Islam, and the Prophet would then send with them some teachers who would teach their own tribes. So this was something that was going on in a very closed and well-knit society, having a very limited number of people. And as I said, it's like a tribal society. And in a tribal society, people are extremely close. And today, because we're living in an urban society, it's difficult to imagine how this could have happened. But if you just transport yourselves mentally to that society, you'll realize that it was not of a big deal.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you. Sameer Sheikh, I hope your mic is working well. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum sir. आवाज आ रही है बराबर से अभी?
हाँ जी.
पर हमारा सवाल ये था कि फराई स्कूल ऑफ थॉट के मुताबिक जो है अरेबियन पेनिनसुला में सिर्फ और सिर्फ सिटीजनशिप के जो हकदार है वो सिर्फ मुस्लिम आवाम है. तो सर अगर कोई वहाँ का मुस्लिम बंदा अगर कोई और मजहब इख्तियार करता है, क्रिश्चियन हो जाता है या हिंदू हो जाता है, तो क्या उसको उसके माँ बाप से, या अगर वो शौहर है तो उसको उसके बीवी से, या अगर वो बाप है तो उसको उसके बच्चों से अलग करके किसी और कंट्री में डिपोर्ट कर दिया जाएगा। और अगर वो अरेबियन पेनिनसुला इस्लाम के लिए खास है, जहाँ से इस्लाम की इशाअत की जाएंगी, तो सर क्या ये अच्छा नहीं होगा कि वहाँ पर नॉन मुस्लिम्स को भी रेसिडेंट्स का हक दिया जाए, ताकि नॉन मुस्लिम्स को भी हम दावत और तबलीग कर सके? क्योंकि अगर ऐसा नहीं किया जाएगा तो जैसे वो जो इल्म सीख रहा है इस्लाम का वहाँ पर, तो हर किसी के पास तो चांस नहीं होगा कि वो अरेबियन पेनिनसुला से बाहर जाकर तबलीग करे, तो वो अपना इल्म सिर्फ और सिर्फ मुसलमानों तक ही महदूद रख पाएंगा फिर। Thank you,
You
sir.
see, we have to understand the scheme of God. I mean, we cannot suggest God to change his scheme. We need to understand why he did that. So he created two centers of Tawheed, or two centers of monotheism. One was in Palestine in the time of the Israelites, and the other was the Arabian Peninsula, which was in the time of the Ishmaelites. So these were the two centers of Tawheed, which was created for mankind, so that there could be one place or two places in the entire earth which could actually present a model of monotheism. So the Prophet himself actually referred to this when he said, "La yajtami'u fihi dinan," that two religions cannot be amalgamated or they cannot coexist in this Arabian Peninsula, so that one particular area could remain a model of monotheism. So in the rest of the entire world, people can live together. Non-Muslims can live with Muslims, or and all sorts of people can live. But there's just one place in which a center of monotheism had to be built. And this is what God's scheme is. So, I mean, we cannot argue with God. I think the reason that he had made the scheme was that he wanted one place in which people should present what monotheism actually looks like. And again, we have to understand that when we say that non-Muslims cannot live in the Arabian Peninsula, or earlier on when Palestine was there in the time of the Israelites, it only means that they cannot be granted permanent citizenship. I mean, they cannot be given the same status as permanent citizens. Yes, there could be embassies. There are still embassies in the Arabian Peninsula in which there are non-Muslims living there for diplomatic reasons. There are other non-Muslims as well. So what Islam actually has said in this regard is that these non-Muslims should not be given a permanent citizenship or a permanent place of residence. I mean, permanent place of worship, I would say. Like temples should not be built there, or synagogues should not be built there, churches should not be built there. Yes, there could be a room where people can pray because they are temporarily staying there. But primarily the import of the Almighty was that one particular area in the whole entire world should be dedicated for monotheism. And that's like a model being created. I mean, we do create model cities, don't we? So we say that this model city is something which will only have these specifications, but the rest of the cities can have anything. The scheme of God that we understand is that he wanted to create this model city or a model state in which monotheism would reign supreme, so that it could become a huge attraction for the rest of the world to see that what exactly does monotheistic values look like.
Usman Haider, please go ahead and ask your question.
सर मेरा सवाल ये है कि जो गामदी साहब की फिक्र है और पूरा जो फ्राई स्कूल ऑफ थॉट है, उसके अंदर जो एक बात आप लोग पेश करते हैं कि हमारे ऊपर इल्जाम लगाया जाता है कि हम मॉडर्नाइज कर रहे हैं दीन को, तो ये इल्जाम तो पिछले कुछ 5 महीनों से ना मैं कुछ शकूक शुबात का शिकार हूँ अल्लाह की एग्जिस्टेंस को लेके। तो जो भी बंदा मुझे लगता है इन शकूक में पड़ता है ना, वो गामदी साहब की फिगर से बहुत ज्यादा यानी कि अट्रैक्ट होता है उसकी तरफ। उसकी वजह ये है कि ये आज के दौर के हिसाब से उसको ना मैनेज किया हुआ है आप लोगों ने, मुझे ऐसा लगता है अब कि पहले पिछले दौर में इस तरह का नहीं हुआ। कोई भी सीन के कोई भी बंदा इस तरह का निकला हो जिसने दीन की ये ताबीर की हो। जब ये दौर आया तब ताबीर हुई है, यानी कि पहले दौर आया फिर ताबीर हुई है, पहले ताबीर नहीं हुई। तो इसके बारे में आप क्या कहेंगे?
नहीं, आप किसी मिसाल से बताएं ना, क्योंकि उसकी वजह मैं आपको बता सकता हूँ कि ताबीर इसलिए नहीं हुई कि 1000 साल से तो हम तकलीद के मर्ज में मुब्तला हैं। हमने अभी भी हम इस वक्त जो हमारा मजहबी रुख है वो तो ये तो नहीं है कि हमने कुरान को समझ के पढ़ना है या उससे कोई राय लेनी है। ये नहीं कि 1000 साल के बाद उस्ताद अमीरुद्दीन फराही ने आके जब ये जोर से दरवाजा खटखटाया कि कुरान को बराह रास्त कुरान से समझना है, अगर ये काम मिसाल के तौर पे इमाम गजाली या इमाम इब्न तैमिया क्या हो चुका होता, तो ये जो इल्जाम फराई स्कूल पे है वो उन पे आना शुरू हो जाता। ये जो आप कह रहे हैं कि आज ही हुआ है पहले क्यों नहीं हुआ, उसकी सादा वजह ये है कि कुरान को कभी और का मौजू बनाया ही नहीं गया, कुरान को रवायात से समझा गया, اور قرآن مجید کے بارے میں طے کر لیا گیا کہ حفظ و تلاوت کی چیز ہے اور ثواب حاصل کرنے کی چیز ہے. اس سے اگر کوئی مطلب نکالنا تھا تو وہ اسلاف نکال چکے ہیں, حدیثوں کے ذریعے سے آپ نے قرآن سمجھنا ہے. تو جب آپ نے پورا پیٹرن طے کر دیا کہ کتاب الہی کو آپ نے سائڈ پہ رکھ دیا اور مدرسوں میں بھی وہ پڑھائی جاتی ہے, حفظ کے لیے پڑھائی جاتی ہے, جلالین سے اس کا ترجمہ سنا دیا جاتا ہے, اس پر غور و فکر جو قرآن بار بار کہتا ہے کہ اس پہ غور کرو, کتاباً انزلناہ الیک لیدبروا آیاتہ, قرآن تو یہ کہتا ہے کہ ہم نے نازل اس لیے کی تھی تاکہ آپ ان کی آیتوں پہ غور کریں. یہ کام تو مسلمانوں نے عرصے سے چھوڑا ہوا تھا. تو اگر آپ یہ غور کرنے کا کام نہیں کریں گے تو ظاہر ہے پھر یہ چیز سامنے نہیں آئے گی. تو جیسے ہی آپ غور کرنا شروع کریں گے تو ہو سکتا ہے کوئی نئے نتائج سامنے آئیں. تو آپ کو اصل میں یہ کہنا چاہیے کہ دور جو ہے وہ یہ نہیں ہے کہ مغربیت آ گئی ہے اور اس نے آ کے ہمیں متنبع کیا کہ دوبارہ سے سوچو, بلکہ اس کے برعکس ہوا ہے کہ استاد حمید الدین فرائی نے آ کے ایک مرتبہ پھر قرآن ہی کی بات کی بنا پہ یہ کہا کہ دیکھو قرآن نے یہ کہا کہ آپ نے قرآن پہ غور کر کے اس کو سمجھ کے آپ نے اس سے مطلب نکالنا ہے, نہ کہ اسلاف کی اندھی تقلید کرنی ہے. تو انہوں نے تو صرف اتنی بات کہی ہے, باقی تو صرف کے نتائج ہیں. اس وجہ سے آپ اس پہ نظر ثانی کریں. میں تو آپ سے یہ کہوں گا کہ ایسا نہیں ہے کہ کوئی دور آیا ہے, اس دور نے آ کے ہمیں متنبع کیا ہے کہ اب نئے دور کے تقاضوں کے لحاظ سے اسلام کو ری انٹرپریٹ ہونا چاہیے, بلکہ دور صرف اس چیز کا آیا ہے کہ 1000 سال سے امت کے جو علماء ہیں, میں تو اسکالر ان کی بات نہیں کر رہا, عام لوگوں کی, اسکالرز جو ہیں, جو امت کے اسکالرز ہیں, وہ قرآن مجید پہ براہ راست غور و فکر نہیں کر رہے. تو انہوں نے آ کے یہ کام شروع کیا اور ان کے جو شاگرد ہیں اور شاگردوں کے شاگرد بھی یہی کام کر رہے ہیں. اس وجہ سے آپ کو یہ لگ رہا ہے کہ شاید یہ کوئی نئی بات ہو رہی ہے. یہ کام اگر پہلے ہو جاتا تو وہ نئی بات پہلے ہونی شروع ہو جانی تھی.
اسپیسیفکلی اس کی بات کر رہا ہوں کہ جو بندہ شک میں مبتلا ہوتا ہے دین کو لے کے یا دین کے کسی حکم کو لے کے, وہ بندہ ادھر اٹریکٹ ہوتا ہے. جیسے میں خود
آپ اس کو ریفریز کر دیں کہ جو آدمی غور و فکر کرنے والا ہے, آپ شک کیوں کہتے ہیں؟ جو بھی آدمی غور و فکر کرنے والا ہوگا تو جو غور و فکر کرنے والے آدمی کو غذا تو وہیں سے ملے گی نا جہاں غور و فکر ہو رہا ہے. شک کا جو ورڈ ہے تو منفی ورڈ ہے. آپ کہیں کہ ایک آدمی جو غور و فکر پر آمادہ ہوتا ہے اور اس کے نتیجے میں اس کے ذہن میں سوالات پیدا ہوتے ہیں, یہ ایک مثبت تعبیر ہے. تو جہاں غور و فکر پیدا ہوگا تو دنیا میں جہاں پہ غور و فکر ہو رہا ہوگا اس کو پیاس اگر بجھانی ہے تو وہیں جائے گا نا. تو اس لیے وہ فطری طور پہ وہیں آتا ہے. لیکن جہاں غور و فکر ہو ہی نہیں رہا ہوگا تو وہاں آئے گا ہی نہیں وہ. تو اس لیے دنیا کی چونکہ اکثر حصوں میں غور و فکر نہیں ہو رہا تو وہاں جا نہیں رہا. تو یہ ڈاؤٹ کے بجائے یا شک کے بجائے آپ یہ استعمال کیجئے کہ جب اس کے ذہن میں سوالات پیدا ہو جائیں گے اور ان سوالات کی وہ تشفی چاہے گا کیونکہ وہ سوالات غور و فکر سے پیدا ہوئے ہیں. تو بات اصل میں غور و فکر ہی ہے.
Safi, you please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Ji walaikum assalam.
Okay. So actually, I'm just wondering about whenever we say, we just tell the history of the Islam, we say initially the prophets came and then said, and the God selected the Bani Israel nation to give the message to the other nations, and then after that, the responsibility given to Bani Ismail. I'm just wondering that, for example, first of all, if even during the Bani Israel, who was the Bani Israel? For example, after the Yusuf al-Islam, when his nation has come to the Egypt, the local people of the Egypt or the followers of Pharaoh or whatever, Aziz, Misr, whatever those people there, I mean, we can't get any history that they became Muslims and why they did not become Muslims. And if somebody become Muslim among those nations, what they were called? They were still called the Bani Israel. Because I believe when the Yusuf Islam was there should be at least few Muslims will be there who are not, even the Quran said that few people got Muslims and they were not from the Bani Israel. So the responsibility for the religion to give the message to other nations go to the Bani Israel. But what are those people who are not Bani Israel but they become Muslims? Same in Bani Ismail. I mean, what I understood, Ghamidi sahab said and other scholars said, the responsibility now given to the Bani Ismail. But Bani Ismail is, yes, they are the Arabs people surrounding the Quraysh area. But what are we who Muslims later and we are not Arab people? So do we have also the responsibility to propagate the Islam? And we are Bani Ismail, and if you are not Bani Ismail, then because this wording I've heard from Ghamidi sahab that the responsibility given to Bani Ismail. So it means that not to other Muslims who are not Bani Ismail. Can you just, yes, if you understood my question, can you clear the confusion? Yeah.
So you see, what he often posits, and you must have heard from him, is that yes, after Prophet Abraham, the responsibility of delivering religion was divided amongst his progeny, and his progeny consisted of two prophets. Of course, there were other prophets as well, but Isaac, who was Ishaq, and Ishmael, who was Ismail. So These were the two branches of Prophet Abraham's progeny that were given the responsibility of communicating religion. But before Prophet Abraham, this was the responsibility of every prophet that came and the nation that he talked to. So it's like an individual responsibility earlier on. What you've just referred to started after Prophet Abraham. And yes, the responsibility was first given to the Israelites. And if people accepted this responsibility, so remember there is a distinction. Israelite is the name of the nation, but they were themselves called Muslims. So the Quran has actually said this in Surah Hajj at the end. It says that huwa sammakumul muslimin. The Prophet Abraham actually gave this name to his progeny. And even in the Quran we find that it says that ummata muslimatallah, that please raise from amongst my progeny people who are Muslims. So basically we have to understand that the progeny of Abraham was religiously called Muslim, but the division of Israel and Bani Israel and Ishmael, that was basically because of they being connected to their forefathers, because one was born from Isaac, the other was born from Ishmael. So this was more of a distinction based on their lineage, on their family background, but they were called Muslims. Now coming to the question that if they accepted Islam, then what exactly were they called, and were they part of the Bani Israel or Bani Ismail, and do they share the same responsibility? So the answer to this question is that the primary responsibility was on the Israelites and was on the Ishmaelites later on. But if people entered their folds, so it was like secondarily, they were also given the same responsibility. They were not called the Ishmaelites. They could not be classified as the Bani Ishmaelites because, of course, they were not from the Ishmaelites. But because they entered their folds, so we say that they became part of them, and therefore now in the collective capacity, although they cannot be called as Ishmaelites, nor the ones that joined the Israelites can all be called Israelites, but becoming part of them secondarily gives them the same responsibility. And so although by name they'll not be called Ishmaelites, but the responsibility that they would share with the Ishmaelites. So the responsibility would be the same, but the name would have this distinction that I am not Bani Ismail. I mean, of course, as you just said, the Bani Ismail or the Ishmaelites are the Arabs. And today you can see them being scattered in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Morocco, in some of the other areas. So they are the classical Ishmaelites. So as far as we are concerned, when we become part of them, we share the responsibility. I mean, the name would be still different, but yes, our responsibility would be the same as the Ishmaelites' responsibility. And the same would be the case with the Israelites when they were given the responsibility. So I hope I have been able to make myself clear.
It's just one very small point that, and what I heard, maybe I'm wrong. They said all prophets after the Yusuf alayhi salam, they came only to guide Bani Israel. Is it right? Something like that? Or is it wrong?
That's a loose statement. I mean, this is just a loose statement that people give. Otherwise, you see, you have to understand that the Israelites became proper Israelites under Moses, Prophet Musa. So, and this was many years after the Prophet Joseph or Prophet Yusuf. So, so Moses was like 1500 years before the Prophet, and Abraham was like 2,500 years. So, I mean, in the initial part of this period, the Israelites followed individual prophets. It was only in the time of the Prophet Moses that they became organized as an entity, as a distinguished and a distinct entity. And after him, after Moses, we find, of course, David and Solomon and some of the other prophets of the Israelites. They reaped the benefits of this organization. So if you study history, you'll find that the Israelites became what they were, or what God wanted to become, make them become in the form of a collectivity. That happened in the time of Prophet Moses. Before that, the process of organization was going on, but it got completed in the era of Prophet Moses.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, that means those prophets are not coming, were coming to guide only Bani Israel. They were, all the people at that time were present.
Yes, I think this is a loose statement that they are just guiding.
Otherwise, against the scheme of the God, God wants everybody to be Muslim, not only the Bani Israel. You're right. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shehzad, for your time, and I thank to all the participants for joining us today. We have reached our time limit of the session, and I'm sorry we won't be able to take up rest of the questions. But just to let you know that we are having another lecture by Dr. Shehzad Saleem tomorrow. So please join us and we will take up your questions after the topic related questions. So hopefully we'll be able to answer all of them. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow and in the upcoming sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.